Alright, we're back with more college football, and in this one, I'll be going through a few developments later on, but first, I will talk about the Staff DNA curveball that I watched on Wednesday between Old Dominion and USF. So to get straight into it, both teams, especially their defenses, were key in this one. Like, their rosters were naturally going to look a little weaker. They weren't playing all of their starters at this point. For example, for South Florida, they had Byron Brown sit out. I don't really know about his plans to either enter the draft, and I mean, there could be an announcement on him potentially entering the transfer portal, but at the same time, he was there on the sidelines in person. He just didn't opt to play. So maybe that's reasonable. But in his place, you would have a man in Gaston Moore take the field who was actually a 6-year senior, making his first start in college football. Yeah, that was definitely intriguing and just really put them in an interesting scenario. But on the other side, too, they had a quarterback, Quinn Hennicle, for their end, who actually, in his last collegiate start last season, managed to put up 206 rushing yards. Was he inherently a thrower of the football? No. But I guess they figured if they could get him out in space and allow him to do damage on the ground, they would have success in the game. At the very least, for the Monarchs, they had a little bit of an ace up their sleeve in Devin Roche. I think he's been a running back there for them who has consistently gotten burned, and he was mentioned to be an impact player in this game, and instantly he started making an impact after one of their defensive linemen in Lynch was able to bury more in the backfield to start out the game. Instantly, he got a deep-ass punt return that got them right in range immediately for them to have a short possession to work with. And I would say that smartly enough for them, they did try to establish the run early and often, but once they got behind the sticks on a self-inflicted wound with the penalty, they did the smart thing in throwing multiple bodies at Hennicle. They had an understanding, South Florida, that if you load up the box as much as possible and you get the perfect spot on the man, the Monarchs aren't going to be able to do much in the game. Unfortunately, they would turn the ball over on downs in that situation, and you could say that was also a theme for this game. I would think that both defenses, honestly, played relatively well. Like, you can chalk that up to inept offense because, again, both these quarterbacks had their limitations. But at the same time, the amount of defensive effort that both of these teams showed throughout the entire contest cannot be discounted. I mean, you had a different player here get back on Gaston Moore and just completely sack him. Like, the pressure was immaculate on both sides, and they promptly were forced to go 3 and out here. But then, man, similarly, even with the Monarchs making some progress, getting another one of their running backs fed, it was Lee, one of their other defensive linemen on South Florida, apart from Schuler, who was also mentioned as an impact player on the defensive side of the ball, man, lit the hell up out of Hennicle in the backfield. Literally, he's dropping back. He's trying to get the ball out, and before he can even think about it, he whacks him straight into the ground. Straight into the motherfucking ground before he can even get the ball out. And Gaskin II would ultimately pick it up, get the Bulls down into prime field position themselves. Ultimately, they were forced to settle for a field goal. What worked against South Florida, even in this situation, is that, man, while they had some good passing plays, a lot of their offense revolved around wide receiver screens. I am not really sure of how well Moore can stretch the ball down the field, and clearly they didn't have enough confidence in him throughout the game outside of a few plays to really do so. So they leaned on the short game. it was also a compensation of sorts, an extension for the run, because when it came to that, they had very little success with that as well. At the very least, one of their guys in Neptune was the beneficiary of a number of some pretty solid yards after catch, after a number of different receptions off these screens. So that was a positive for them. And I mean, hey, they're up at this point. They're holding Old Dominion down, so it looks to be all right. But Old Dominion, whenever they felt like they had a chance to go against the grain, get them, in Hennikel for that matter, in the proper lane to run, and when they felt as though they had matchups to exploit, they started doing just that. A.R. Gladding, yes, that is his name. One of their wide receivers on the team at the moment, man, he started to go very, very crazy on this South Florida defense by himself, accounting for a number of different catches here, and ultimately picking up a total of 36 yards, including a situation where he managed to get a long conversion after getting a massive stiff arm on a different defender here. Ultimately, Hennikel would get himself into the end zone for a 6-yard rushing touchdown to give them the lead here. And then the entire second quarter is just like, in and of itself, outside of a dom of a pass to Jeremiah Coger, the true freshman wide receiver for South Florida, from 31 yards out, which he just completely loses the defensive back here. To be honest with you, I mean, this man was supposed to be in coverage on him, and he just turns right around, starts accounting for a different route, just leaves Coger wide open in the corner, and that was probably the easiest throw of the night for Gaston Moore. It was probably the best throw of the night for him, because otherwise, a lot of it came under pressure. But outside of that play, everything else was chaos for all the wrong reasons. South Florida themselves got in a situation early where they got one of those patented wide receiver screens to Neptune for 43 yards, and yet still managed to have Nico Gramatica, when he was in field goal range, miss. Neither team, in fact, could take advantage of these miscues whatsoever. Old Dominion was, even though they were limiting the passing game and Hennikel wasn't doing a lot of damage from there, they were imposing their will on the ground. And that would become even more dominant towards the tail end of the game. The way they had been running the football and the way they had been controlling the line of scrimmage, you would have thought that this would have been a game that would have gone way more out of proportion in the favor of Old Dominion. And instead, this remained just a one-possession ball game for a while. When it came to them getting down the field for a time there, with South Florida forcing multiple 3-and-outs here, credit to their defense, they could not get there originally. Then, when they got themselves in these situations, and this shit said it all right here. I mean, they got a hell of a fucking lurk by Crutchfield on Gaston Moore. Like, he got completely baited. He was looking for a shot over to the sideline and just kind of got a little too hesitant with throwing it. Ultimately, once he tried to get this deep throw in, Crutchfield flew right the hell over, reading his eyes perfectly, and made the play. They had a grand chance. It wasn't good field position, but from there, with about 3 minutes left, they had a good chance to go down the field, get themselves on the board at least, and to top it off, with them originally stopping South Florida on their first possession, they were the team to get the ball back in the second half. So a double dip was potentially in play for them. And what they proceeded to do was fine for the most part. I mean, they were working the hell out of the clock. They were taking advantage of the fact that first down stopped the clock after the 2-minute warning. A.R. Gladden continued to get involved. They continued to get Roche and Jones, that running back pairing, involved in offense. And they also got a massive play from one of their other wide receivers in Thomas from 20 yards out to ultimately get into the red zone. Even when they lost some yardage, and that's credit to Schuler finally stepping up and being the impact player that he was promoted to be, ultimately, they settle for the field goal. And this motherfucker, literally, with just needing to place the snap down on the ground, he mishandles it, and they come away with absolutely nothing at all. And that ends that. That would be the theme for Old Dominion. They could have already put them away with the way that they were playing. And they just could not bring themselves to do it. So you just had them continue to linger around for a while. But it would finally turn for them once they were able to pick on Gaston Moore again and test his ability as a quarterback. Once Carter got this interception here and they got deep inside South Florida territory again, they didn't miss. It would be Jones this time, not Roche, not Hennikel, to just burst right through the middle of the gap with some great blocking up front, mind you. Once he took a step past the line, like, he had so much fucking space opened up for him, and the touchdown run was just made all the more easier that way. So that would give Old Dominion the lead. And, I mean, they did allow them to drive back down with all of the wide receiver screens. This time, Smith would be the recipient, getting himself a nice 18-yard gain out of it. But they would settle again where Gramatica once more missed, which is shocking considering how solid of a kicker he's been in his time at South Florida. But if you are Old Dominion, you have to take advantage of it. And while Roche would definitely do a great job of getting the action started, just bursting down the field with his world-class speed for a 35-yard gain, USF started to tighten up. And it nearly cost them. Nearly cost them. Why do I say that? My goodness. This shit right here was crazy. Because they're driving, they're making good progress, and ultimately you have a situation where Hennikel is going for you have a play where Hennikel is trying to go for a pass, and he does heave one down the field. Different scenario. That makes it up. Yeah, Hennikel gets out in space after the botched attempt to try to throw the ball. And as he's running, you have multiple South Florida defenders surrounding him. One of them actually forces a fumble on him for a second. And South Florida gets the ball back in that moment. You're probably not thinking much of that, but they would find something absolutely wild within the context of the replay. Because this man, Rucker, and once they detailed who he was, the man actually appears to be a good cornerback in his role, yet for whatever reason, he decided to start headhunting. It got to a point where once this play was dead, Hennikel was literally laid out on the ground, and they needed to get multiple staff members to help him off the football field. That's how bad it was. Literally led with the crown of his helmet. Literally, as it just cocks back like this while he's falling. And then the man had the nerve to act like he didn't commit a targeting penalty there. They promptly called him for that. And for a second there, that extended Old Dominion's drive. It also hurt them that they had an offsetting penalty take place, but at the same time, once it came down to it, because Hennikel, once again, was not a thrower of the football. The amount of times that both Hennikel and Moore, for that matter, missed wide receivers down the field in this second half was crazy. And Gladding was about to blow a fucking gasket about it. I mean, they scored here, yes, but it just continued. Like, there were a couple cases in which he actually dropped passes as well. One sequence literally had the man go on, get the football, and then kick it up accidentally. Yes, very weird stuff. Both defenses would continue to hold for a while as we got into fourth quarter play, which is exactly what you want to see. I mean, you had a few 3-and-outs. South Florida literally had a drive ending with no net yardage to speak of, as they had no other choice to substitute true freshman in Lackland Hewitt in the game because of the fact that Moore would get a nice pass, a very nice pass down the field. But with that would come a very low hit that unfortunately took him out of the game. And it wasn't the best for him, but it's like you'd still want to see him in, trying to do what he can to help his team win. So that's definitely unfortunate stuff. South Florida, when it came down to it though, and this did them no favors. But another theme of their night, they couldn't convert third downs. And yes, in this situation, this was damn 3rd and 20. That's going to be hard for any team. But legitimately, their conversion rate was terrible throughout the night. And in situations where they needed to desperately extend drives, in a situation where a touchdown would have very much sufficed, they couldn't get it done. Even with South Florida being able to impose their great defensive play for a while, miscues would continue to do them in. And that's what it kept on coming down to. Like, Old Dominion had the advantage in multiple capacities between ball control, between turnover margin, and they, for the longest time, had yet to do anything. Think about this. Neptune, honestly, this wasn't even Neptune. There was a different person in his way. They can't credit him with that. Because when I was watching the game, there's a different person moving in the direction of where he's attempting to make this catch, and it hits this motherfucker's helmet, falls into the hands of the fucking long snapper for Old Dominion in Brandon Durkin from Florida, New York. You can't make that shit up. What you also can't make up is that Old Dominion would manage to not do much of anything at all. They did pick up a first down, and that's fair. They missed the field goal from 36 yards out. Still, South Florida would be caught in the trap yet again, and this time, Old Dominion would take advantage of the true freshman, limiting their ability to get the short gain working and ultimately forcing him to throw deep. Like, they'd been forcing South Florida to stretch the ball down the field the entire game, and promptly, Carter III again got himself an interception in this game. Once this sequence happened right here, I knew it was a wrap. That's all Old Dominion had to do from the jump. Just continue to lean on their strength and finally take advantage of miscues. Hennikel, to this point, had gone something like 2 of 7 passing in the second half. But they still had the stark advantage in running the football. And man, hey, bro. Not to mention, too, this was just a stupid interception also. Like, literally, they tried to engineer a fake punt. Had the punter throw it, and promptly Carter III probably got the easiest pick of his life. Then you had somebody else try to talk shit to him. It's like, yo, just punt the ball next time. Literally, one of the punts beforehand, this punter was acting as if he was going to try to fake it and serenading the entire defense to try to lull him to sleep. That didn't work, and he punted the football that time. The game on the line is like that. It's on the line at the moment, and you give up position on your own side of the field like that. Risk that just to try to pull off a trick play. It wasn't worth it at that time. And you can question the legitimacy of that. Old Dominion, though, seeing that, they finally made him pay the price. So, you had this sequence from Hennikel right here. Gutsy fucking player, by the way, to get knocked out like that and even think about coming back into the game. Instantly after that happened, he was trying to come back into the game. And he showcased a good amount of strength on this particular run. Literally, just barreling through the defense. The whole of the South Florida front seven is trying to rip the ball out of his fucking hands. Is trying to bring him down, and he is holding on. He's keeping the legs churning. He's got offensive linemen behind him, pushing him forward, and that ultimately ended up being a 16-yard gain. And if that wasn't enough, they'd been trying to get the read option working all night long, and finally, they got him to bite. Hennikel got the smooth keep with the right pull to distract the defense for long enough, and ultimately, Schuler, the impact player, was caught out of position as Hennikel bursted up the middle for a 51-yard gain and the dagger of a touchdown run. Like, that was effectively the game right there. Yes, South Florida would throw another interception with Hewitt getting intercepted by Isles, but at the end of the day, the Old Dominion squad would win 24-10 in this curveball. This was just a pretty interesting watch, to say the least. But you'll understand in a second why, again, this probably could have gotten a little more out of hand if Old Dominion actually took this completely serious throughout the whole way. I mean, no, Hennikel didn't have the best day passing, 127 passing yards on 44% completion. But they knew where their strength lied. Credit to one of their defenders for getting 11 tackles, a sack, and a TFL in the game. For South Florida, on the other hand, in terms of their passing, it was by far their calling card in terms of being able to move the ball down the field. But again, once things shortened up, or once they were forced to actually throw passes in intermediate and deep range, they just could not. So while 281 yards as a squad, led by 236 passing from Moore and a touchdown, is solid, and 71.4% completion from him ain't that bad. But 4 interceptions, they forced that many interceptions, and this game was still a one-possession game for the longest period of time. If that wasn't enough, Old Dominion only fumbled the ball one time, and I don't believe that, they lost it, while South Florida had 5 total turnovers. So that, from that angle, this probably could have been a blowout in Old Dominion's favor. But it gets even crazier here. The rushing attack was automatic for one team and completely non-existent for the other. Now, yes, you have to account for sack yardage here, but even with that in mind, as a unit, the Monarchs ran for 259 yards amongst 4 rushers and 3 total touchdowns on 5 yards per carry in 52 rushes. That's how efficient they were running the football the entire game. The entire game. And yet they still got themselves down the field in that way and simply could not finish their drives. South Florida, by comparison, yes, Gaston Moore touched the dirt a lot, clearly, to the point where he got taken out of the game. I don't think there's a question about that. And while Hewitt would also face a couple of sacks, they still ran for a combined 53 yards on 1.6 yards per carry. Completely different playing field there. They had this in the bag if they executed properly on their end. Simply to just convert off of these miscues. And while they were able to at times, again, they just let them stick around for a while. It really wasn't necessary, but they'll still take the win regardless. Neptune for South Florida had 9 receptions for 102 yards, and Jeremiah Coger had 4 receptions for 68 yards and a touchdown. Smith also added 5 receptions for 61 yards. That is just some crazy stuff. So, that'll do it for that game. But to get into some other news here, it would be mentioned a few days ago that Will Stein of Kentucky would have a new general manager by his side, per multiple reports. And as this AP article states, quote, new Kentucky coach Will Stein is bringing Pat Biondo from Oregon with him as the Wildcats' new general manager among his staff changes announced Tuesday. Stein also hired Pete Nuchta as assistant general manager and is keeping Josh Pruitt as director of operations. End quote. I was not all that familiar with Biondo beforehand, but it clearly shows from Kentucky's end that we are actively trying to push forth in a very new direction. After all, when you're stuck in mediocrity for that long as a program, you have to be willing at some point to take some form of direction. And Kentucky, with the Will Stein hire in the first place, is trying to win. They're trying to be a team that isn't a pushover in the SEC anymore. They're trying to stand amongst the elite of the elite and continue to go toe-to-toe with them. Now, I don't know if Kentucky, even with just one season of Will Stein, can still reach that territory so soon to where they actually come out on the right side of these things. That may take some time. Like, there's still a lot to consider when it comes to that. But, they are at least making the moves that could suggest that in time, they will reach that point. As for Biondo, there's a little more information about him here that I read. Quote, Biondo has spent 4 years as the director of football recruiting strategy at Oregon, where the 5th-seeded Ducks are hosting James Madison on Saturday in the first round of the college football playoff. He was senior assistant of recruiting and operations at Texas A&M for 3 seasons before going to Oregon. End quote. So, at that time, when he was at Texas A&M, which I would believe was a few years back, probably on the tail end of Jimbo Fisher's tenure there, he was kind of being the headmaster in a way. If we're talking about senior assistant of recruiting and operations, then you're definitely dictating how certain scouts will operate in those situations. And ultimately just finding creative ways to game plan around getting certain talent, and then actually putting forth different efforts in terms of visits and things like that to engineer those things as well. At that time, there was no true general manager at that point. We weren't in that sort of time yet. But now, with that being the case, where you have a number of different programs all over the place, not even just in college football, but all over the landscape, having general managers now to handle these things between different NIL contracts and different, forms of compensation for players on the team, just managing those things, allocating those things out in a sort of even manner, as evenly as you possibly can. It makes sense for him to move forward to Kentucky and try to restore this program to some kind of relevancy, I would say, in the football landscape. We know what they do in college basketball, and they are still a college basketball school. But damn it, you want to be able to complement that in a different sport too. The connection, though, it is kind of tough for Oregon to lose both such a dynamic offensive coordinator and also your, director of football recruiting strategy. Because if we're constantly going over these kinds of jobs that center specifically around recruiting, he's definitely by himself been an ace at that for some time. So he could definitely benefit them. Oregon is still miles above Kentucky as a football program when it comes to prestige, in a completely different stratosphere. And they've already, throughout the year, acquired different recruiting talent via, I think, just general announcements of commitments to their school. So I don't think this move would hurt them too much in being able to carve out a solid recruiting class this season. But I don't know. This probably comes down to some other nuances of the job. that could start to eat away at Oregon in time. Of course, we won't know that until we end up progressing further down the line here. As for some other news, in a different form, as the ACC would make a shift to their conference scheduling, they had multiple reports from ESPN talking about it, but they also themselves, with Commissioner Jim Phillips, put out a presser stating that essentially they will start to be phasing in a brand new form of their scheduling starting next season. As this actual statement from the ACC themselves, and Phillips for that matter, states, quote, beginning in 2026, the ACC will introduce the new schedule structure through a transitional season designed to balance competitive equity on our existing non-conference game contracts and account for the league's unique 17-team footprint. 12 teams will play a 9+1 schedule, while 5 teams will play an 8+2 schedule. To go over that real quick, essentially because of the fact that there are 17 teams in the conference, making it uneven, you have to find a way to evenly distribute this somehow. So those 12 teams, it'll rotate every single year. There's probably going to be some influx, but essentially at least 12 teams are going to play a schedule that consists of at least 9 conference games with a Power 4 non-conference opponent, and while 5 on the other end will play at least 8 conference games with at least 2 Power 4 non-conference matchups. Speaking of these non-conference games, man, like, it definitely will help the ACC. It's been something with the results of the college football playoff in mind. It has been something that's definitely been getting talked about for years now, decades even, about how teams should be facing off against the best of the best far earlier than the postseason to give them a truly solid resume to look at and to truly establish themselves as either a contender in the space or as a pretender in the space. Literally. Because there have been complaints all over the place. Not just about teams getting snubbed, but also about how some of the criteria actually works. I mean, you'll have teams get in, I suppose, that don't really have a great strength of schedule overall on paper, which is one thing that might be looked at. But if they have a solid enough standing already, or if they simply just continue to do what they have to do, even with lesser competition, they could potentially find themselves getting in over other teams that are somewhat deemed as more valuable, as more formidable, with more respectable schedules across the year. And while I can't say that I completely am on the side of that, it does make sense. It does make sense to want to make a shift to where you get solid Power 4 competition going. Especially if it is the case where, with how it's set up, even though you have G6 teams getting in, a lot of it consists of Power 4 schools that regularly face off against each other. So your postseason matchup is probably one of the first times in a long time, or maybe ever in some cases, that you are seeing a specific program. And it's like anything can happen on any given college football game. We've seen that more often than not. But it's like, damn, I guess some people just see it as, okay, we know that we are a school that deserves to be here. Can we really say the same about a person standing aside from us, about an opponent standing aside from us? Maybe, maybe not. And that uncertainty is something that has just ticked people off, I suppose. So having these Power 4 games, especially if you have multiple taking place, I mean, hey, you still have to go out there and win them, but it gives you a chance to hash it out far before a committee can intervene. You get to see it on a national display in real time in the height of the college football season, in the regular season, to then make a decision from there. The ACC has also got another component of this, as it says per ESPN, quote, 4 ACC schools, Clemson, Florida State, Georgia Tech, and Louisville, have an annual rivalry game against the SEC. And while Louisville AD Josh Harrod said his school is eager to play a strong schedule each season, the other 3 initially balked at the lack of scheduling flexibility that would come with a 9-game conference slate and an annual non-conference game against their SEC rival. End quote. So, I mean, we've kind of seen some of these already. I would believe that Clemson, South Carolina, is their counterpart as an SEC rival. Florida State, Florida is their counterpart as an SEC rival. Georgia Tech, Georgia's more than likely their counterpart as an SEC rival. And even though it would be bold as hell to say this, given the way that Louisville beat the fuck out of Kentucky this season, that would be the interstate rivalry right there. So, there you have it. That kind of helps them already. And while in some of these cases, some of these teams have been competitive, it hasn't been like that consistently. And that's what it initially comes down to. That's crazy though. Like, Louisville, of all teams, a team in Louisville who has not really been, like, I can't say that they've been a powerhouse, but, like, they have not been a team that has really taken over in the ACC. Even with their season this year. Even with that in mind. Like, they just have not been able to really break through as a contender in their own conference. It's always been a rotating cast of Clemson, Florida State, and Georgia Tech over at least the last couple of decades. And those schools are the teams that have a problem, or had a problem initially with this. I suppose they've settled into it now, especially with the way that Georgia Tech, even in losses, have played against Georgia over the past couple of seasons. But hey, man, like, that's a little interesting. Also, quote, Clemson has also scheduled an annual series against Notre Dame that starts in 2027, meaning that any year in which the Tigers are slated for 9 ACC games, they'd be guaranteed at least 11 games versus Power 4 opponents. And under the ACC's new 9-game scheduling plan, which was approved in September, each team will be required to play at least 10 games against Power 4 competition, meaning 1 non-conference Power 4 game for the schools playing the full 9-game conference slate, and 2 for any teams playing 8, end quote, as was already mentioned. Clemson and Notre Dame on a consistent basis starting in 2027? I'm shocked that we still doing business with Notre Dame right now. And that's the thing. We're still in this situation. But you don't want to go outright and join the ACC for good. I mean, because you have this. I've already mentioned a quote from Notre Dame when I was talking about their potential snub from the CFP about how they also are guaranteed to have 5 ACC opponents on their schedule for an annual basis as well. Clemson is now another one here. And it's like, dude, I mean, hey, that could help strengthen the schedule for sure, especially if Clemson is able to regain form, because that's the thing. So it makes sense that this would start there. I don't know what the hell happened with Clemson overall this season. They got to be able to truly retool as a roster and see where they are at. Notre Dame, on that front, doesn't really look like they're slowing down, but of course they want to get back on the right track after missing out on the playoffs. I don't think that's a question. So that could be an interesting matchup for sure. There's also a couple of other things to mention here as they state they have a new tiebreaker rule coming in. Now, for the ACC themselves, when Jim Phillips mentioned it here, essentially it says that it will be updated and announced ahead of the 2026 season. And I guess this was another component mentioning how things could look different with Duke potentially making the playoff in a different scenario. As the ESPN article literally states themselves. Like, not only could changes in the CFP have altered it, like I already mentioned, but hey, if they try to construct it in a certain way, the policy for the ACC might also account for scenarios that involve the team like Duke, even with them being 7-5, winning the entire damn conference. So it'd be interesting to see how that looks, and we'll have to stay tuned for that, honestly. It's going to be a while if they're going to wait before the start of next season. But, hey, something, I guess, is going to give at some point. So, that's an interesting side to things. Also, for some different news here, man, we got another situation talking about potential misconduct. Although the actual incidents in question look a little different, it's still clearly something that Ohio University was very much against. As it is detailed by this ESPN article, and per them initially, quote, Ohio University fired Coach Brian Smith because Wednesday, saying Smith violated his contract by engaging in serious professional misconduct and participating in activities that reflect unfavorably on the university. The school did not provide specifics on Smith's misconduct. Smith, who went 8-4 in his first regular season as Bobcats coach, had been placed on leave on December 1st for undisclosed reasons. End quote. So, yeah, for a while, initially it was just stated that, hey, he committed some form of misconduct on the job. We didn't necessarily know what it was, but we knew at that moment that in a similar way, he had to leave. There would be money on the table that would not have to be paid out because of the fact that he got fired for cause, in the same way that Jerome Moore was fired for cause and Michigan could withhold paying him out. So it was just interesting to see, because you have that going on, and there were also some things about that I've been looking into and eventually will get out and get into at a later time. But with all that in mind, it's just to constantly hear about that over the last few days just is fucking wild in the first place. And you just don't expect that stuff to happen that consistently, even though, again, clearly there's a lot going on. For Ohio themselves, it just put them in an interesting situation. I read multiple articles here, and they mentioned that, Smith is a recent hire. He's actually a former college football player in different universities. I think they mentioned, they mentioned Washington State and Hawaii as former stops for him at the end of this article. So he's clearly got some experience and could, in theory, being there with players in real time, definitely resonate with them and be able to understand what they're going through in those moments. And that kind of relationship always helps as a coach. There is such a thing as taking it too far. And it sucks. Like, Ohio has been through the ringer with their most recent head coaches already. They had Tim Albin, their former guy last season, moved to Charlotte. And how'd that pan out for Tim Albin? Not very well, to say the least. Ohio honestly had a fine season this year, too. And, in just a matter of a few days, they're going to be facing off against UNLV, with John Hauser now being the interim head coach per ESPN as well. I'm very certain that Ohio would beat this UNLV team. Even with them being, what was it, like, not 10-3? And being in the Mountain West title game. Even with that in mind, man. They are far from legitimate. But of course, legitimacy, that's a very murky thing, especially if you have a man in Smith alleged to have not been living up to his billing and holding himself in proper conduct on the job. And it looks a little different here. Now, from somewhere else, it was mentioned that he was having an affair of some kind. And while, again, that is something that can definitely not happen on the job, with the entire Sharon Moore situation going on, still, we've already established that point. It's crazy how, again, like, yes, in a way, like, there are just things that you can't control with that, but you are still actively making a choice in that decision to legitimately go against your standards here and potentially have a scenario where you are actively on the job and then potentially going home to a family of some sort while engaging in this kind of behavior. You just can't have that as a very grown individual. This man is 45 and you're engaging in this kind of behavior. Like, come on. At some point, man, you have to hold yourself down and truly take yourself seriously enough to understand. It's like, dude, you know, and have an understanding that if this was found out by those you hold dear to your heart, it would break theirs. There is no worth in you engaging in that kind of behavior, and you're doing it anyway. Now, I would have to look more into that if that is and ended up being the case here, but that was not what I read about this. There's a different component to this. Even if we are looking at it from this standpoint. Because there is a scenario here where maybe there could be mental health issues going on, but that isn't what was outlined here. There wasn't anything else accompanying the firing for Smith aside from this right here. As this quote states via Sports Illustrated and The Athletic reported Wednesday evening that Smith violated a provision in his contract on alcohol and drugs, and that he had not acknowledged storing and consuming alcohol in his office during work hours. In a letter detailing a meeting with Smith, Ohio University Director of Employee Experience Suzanne Durst wrote that Smith also confirmed that on occasion, a few assistant coaches, all over the age of 21, joined him privately in his office after games for a single drink of bourbon. Smith reportedly denies that he ever worked while under the influence and that drinks consumed on the job never impacted his performance. End quote. That quote, or the tail end of that, also stands true with what he's been doing. He's denounced these claims from the university completely. He is not for it, and he's had a statement on behalf of him stated by his lawyer essentially saying that, hey, we're vigorously disputing this. We're not having this at all. Honestly, this seems plausible. This seems very plausible. Again, this is yet another situation that you should not be doing on the job. Especially when you are around impressionable minds and you're running an entire team. Yes, that can be strenuous. That can be very strenuous. But you've got to be on your A game more often than not. And even if you aren't, you relay that to your guys. You're spending all this time with them. You're building these countless connections with them. And if there is a situation where you are not performing at your best, you got to have that honest conversation with those guys. And they'll more than likely understand. That would be much better than Smith in this situation allegedly resorting to these things. Even in wins, even when things are going good. You got to be sharp when you are accounting for that many people. When you are, in ways, caring for and are liable for that many people. Between players and other staff members that are all relying on you to carry out things in the proper way. Now again, like, it is what it is when it comes to that. Like, if you're gonna drink, you're gonna drink. I don't think that there's really much anybody can do there. If that's what they elect to do, it is just about being responsible at the end of the day with it. And I mean, as far as we know, if it's limited to that in the general sense, like, I mean, okay, you're not going out here and committing other countless crimes compounded on that or anything. But there is a sense of professionalism that comes with the job. And you are legitimately not taking that seriously. If in your own office space, think about this. You have some recruited people, and I guess people who are looking to maybe join the school, or maybe considering doing so, or could potentially flip depending on how their experience with you goes. And they come to your office, and they see fucking bourbon, whiskey, whatever kind of alcohol, and whatever kind of drugs in your office. If they're a rational and sound mind, they're going to turn away from that program immediately because they're not going to deal with that shit. And then we're actively roping in other people, allegedly, to do this with you. I don't care, like, oh, it's a single drink of bourbon. Legal words mean everything. A single drink of bourbon. Nigga, you still can't do that shit. That shit don't matter to me. How many situations in real life, to take it in that aspect, again, even though this thing doesn't appear to be that way, it's like, yeah, it might just be a cup, so what? Single cup of different kinds of alcohol have gotten people in even greater trouble in their own respective lives. So you can't go ahead and say that. And even if it's a single drink, even with that in mind, can you sit here and say that these are shots? Can you sit here and say that these are full glasses of whatever drink? Maybe accompanied with you also managing to take different substances or drugs like that at the same time, potentially. Which makes it even worse. No matter how you do it. Because again, I can't even say that. I am not a medical guy. But instantly, as you start to settle in, as that shit starts to get in your system, you are actively getting impaired. The moment you start to engage in that stuff, your stuff gets wired around differently, and entire aspects of your body start to wire in different ways. You don't obviously get in situations where you just completely lose all sense of function unless you abuse them completely. That's where you get yourself inherently all over the place, completely gone. And you, again, don't want to have yourself in that position on the job with that much on the line. It just, you have to have professionalism there. You have to have some form of maturity there. You have to have enough respect for what it is that you are doing to keep that shit separate. Like, even if you can act like it's never impacted your job performance, my nigga, how do you think it is genuinely with people coming into your office and seeing that go down? Hell, a few of the players on the team might have found themselves in situations where they are actively trying to talk to him about something. A potential position battle. Something that might be going on in their own personal life. Potentially trying to understand a play on the field. Any number of things. And you are walking into one of these drinking parties. You are actively walking into him, engaging in taking this material. And again, even if it's not impairing him, even if it's not affecting him on the job, what do you think that's going to do to a person who is constantly seeing that? Even in the situations where these assistant coaches are engaging in this behavior as well, how do you think that's affecting them in time? Even if they think, oh, this is cool, you're actively misleading them. And you are spurring forth potential misconduct on their end by trying to make them believe that, hey, this is a part of the job. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. They are actively, even though they are their own young adults in this sense, they are still actively learning on the job. They don't have the same power that you have. And you are abusing that. You're using your own experience and seniority to just completely mislead these guys into different directions. And then if they go on their own eventually and start to become head coaches or position coaches at different universities, they're going to believe that they can carry themselves around that way too. And that is not how it works. That's just not. Like, as a leader, that is irresponsible. And, you know, even if he disputes that, like, I do understand from that sense why Ohio would just completely pull the plug on the entire thing. You can't have that. That is not how you build trust in an organization. That's not how you do it. Like, it's college. That stuff might consistently happen all the time on college campuses. But again, you have to keep that stuff separate. You have to keep that stuff completely separated. This would not be an issue. Although, again, when it comes to other drugs, like what type of drugs are we talking about potentially? And then again, you have to also consider, is he a person in his life who has ever been an alcoholic as well? Those are also things to consider here. So you don't want to take that away completely. But if he was doing this at home, in his own space, without involving other people to that extent, that is a little bit different. Still, you are actively making the school look bad by engaging in this behavior and roping other people, unsuspecting people, subordinate people into this, and trying to call yourself teaching them the tools of the trade in the worst way imaginable. Like, sure, they could be discussing a number of different things over this single drink of bourbon. But all that time spent doing that is literally taking away from them actually getting the lessons that they would need to carry into their own respective positions as potential coaches in the future. You're depriving them of that for some form of relief. And that's just no. No. Because honestly, it is an uphill climb. There are so many people who would love to have the opportunities to be on the sidelines coaching different teams. There's a wide market of people still looking for their chance at these moments. Still, and here you are with a chance to take on a few, potentially put them on the right path. And you are actively steering them in the wrong direction. Just cannot have that, man. Can't have that at all. So that is all around just a pretty interesting wrinkle to things. I'm sure, very sure, that more information will come out to this. And again, if he is actually not found to be guilty of any of that, and again, different situation. But as far as we know now, all of these are allegations. So we will see what happens in time. As for a different development, Texas would fire their defensive coordinator, their current defensive coordinator in Kwiatkowski a few days back, and per multiple sources, also from something that I saw through my Fox Sports feed as well, they have now reacquainted with Will Muschamp and are now hiring him as a defensive coordinator. Now, Will Muschamp is definitely that is a name that I've definitely heard before. And the second I was thinking about it, I was like, okay, I definitely remember this man at Florida for damn sure. They also mentioned, as I'd been looking at different things, that he had been spending time with Georgia as a defensive coordinator as well. They're calling him a defensive analyst with some of these things as well. But yeah, what an interesting scenario there. Like, wow. Who would have thought? I genuinely didn't think something like that was on the table for them, to be honest with you. But, I mean, Texas, I don't know. I really don't know what the game plan is here. Maybe they are just genuinely trying to rehash some good times with him specifically. And I don't know if that's honestly a bad thing at all. Yeah, he was at Florida for all this time, and he was with South Carolina for a while too. Seemingly, his greatest success was a lone 11-win season in 2012 with the Florida team. It's been a rocky climb. He's gotten some bowl-eligible seasons in him, but his record as a head coach has been meddling. And, I mean, with Georgia, hey, in just the past few seasons, we've seen what they've been able to do when it comes to performing on the national stage. So his presence there has definitely been felt, especially when it comes to how many prospects that defense has fucking pumped out over the last few years and will continue to pump out. It is like a pipeline. Texas is in a similar realm with how great their defense was projected to be this season, and there had been a few hurdles for them. But they managed all right. Although, again, giving up fucking like 32 points to Arkansas in a game where Texas scored 52 is just insane. But all jokes aside there, if he can bring that same sort of defensive impact to a team that's already getting good enough recruits on that side of the football, man, it makes things so much better for them. And, I mean, if you're a Texas fan, because, I mean, I wasn't even really alive watching college football when Will Muschamp was there in that capacity for Texas. But I'm sure for those who were old enough to have watched him and watched those Texas teams at that time, if it ended on a certain way, then this is a completely different situation. But if it ended all right, and with the success that Texas had in the 2000s, man, I would think that some hardcore Texas fans right now are definitely happy about the move. So it'd be interesting to see how that looks in this new era of college football. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.